All right. Episode 3, week 3.
Well,
Oh, man. So much happens in this week. I actually think it's really good that we ended where we did last week because thematically it's really great. I just feel like it was a nicer clump together. Like this section was good.
yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't end on like a cliffhanger really, which was also nice for me personally.
I agree.
Yes. The biggest news of this week is from the movie, obviously, which is we get some Taylor Lautner time.
Actually, also, not what I thought you were going to say, but also yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not the biggest news. I guess the biggest news is guess what? He's a vampire! I forgot that was the biggest news. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
I just got back from my book club earlier today, and I was telling everyone about the Twilight podcast and asking who they were, like Team Edward or Team Jacob. And everyone who was Team Jacob watched the movies first, which just confirmed overtly. Yeah, everyone who was Team Edward read the books first. Everyone who was Team Jacob watched the movies first.
Although which I have had some realizations while reading it this time that I'm like, I am Team Edward for Bella, but if I was in Bella's shoes, I'd probably pick Jacob.
Okay, yes, my friend Dallas literally was like, yes, Bella, take Edward, leave Jacob for me.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get more into my thoughts about that later, but like
phenomenal.
Was definitely affirmed for me in these chapters. So although we haven't had quite enough Jacob to make sure that I would definitely be like, yes, Jacob, but like right now, yeah.
Oh, I'm for sure diehard Edward Cullen still, no doubt about it. The intensity, the obsession.
I think he's creepy, and I just can't get past the creepiness. Not my thing.
All right. You know what? We're gonna talk about it, obviously, because I do have some notes that are like, should Bella be concerned at this point? Yes. Would I be concerned if I was Bella? Absolutely not. I'd be so into it. Yes,
yeah, this is where we differ.
Sure. Absolutely. Hands down. All right. We better just jump in. We're gonna jump ahead. Okay. So we jump in with Twilight chapter 6. Wow. Scrolling back.
Also, just a note, because you read this last week. So we're going to be, this week is covering chapters 6 through 9 in Twilight and 8 through 10 in Midnight Sun. So, and chapter 6, little summary, Bella gets her truck back and goes to school the next day, where people are talking about how she had to like go to the nurse's office and things like that. And then they go to the Push Beach and we meet Jacob, and he talks about some stuff.
He drops the tea, the old family legend tea. He's not supposed to.
Very interesting that in the movies he does not explicitly say that they're vampires.
Nope.
Like, that is quite the difference.
Yes, because he's so overt in the books. He's like, the cold ones. Do you not get it yet? The vampires.
Yeah.
Like, he really...
Very obvious. And also just, like, openly admits, he's like, oh, yeah, it was my great-grandfather who had this treaty or whatever. Oh, yeah, I guess I just broke that. Like, cash.
Okay, but again... I do kind of like, because he's supposed to be 15, right? And like 15-year-old.
That also blew my mind. I forgot that he was that young.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Not as crazy as Edward being like 100-something, but still crazy.
I don't know. Again, I don't know. I don't love the side of me we're seeing in this podcast, but I'm standing by it. I'm showing up authentically on the internet. rumor, I don't know, impressions of me, whatever. We're not going to talk about it more. Okay. So
if I keep anyone who's watching this taking off my glasses and rubbing my eyes, I'm not crying at anything. I just got sunscreen in my eyes. So
my eyes are watering so bad this week too. I have a whole box of tissues here next to me.
I should probably get tissues, but I wasn't having this problem until I got on camera. So
I immediately thought, I'll hand them to you. Ugh. Ridiculous. Okay. But going back, yeah, he's 15, and I do feel like that's kind of like an authentic move for 15-year-old sees Bella's 17, 16.
I think she's 17.
Yeah.
I think.
Because Edward's 17.
Edward's 17, yeah.
Yeah.
She is.
Anyways, so yeah, I do feel like that's kind of an authentic move for like 15-year-old boy talking to a 17-year-old girl he is kind of into, says too much, and then is like, did I say that? Whoops. Yeah, felt like authentic mid-teen boy move. Yeah, so I can be into that. And yeah, hella irresponsible. Like, what? No.
Yeah, a little crazy. Mm-hmm. Also, in relation to Jacob being so young, I think we've only talked about this offline and not on the podcast, but I recently learned about that for New Moon, the movie, the original plan was to recast Jacob because, I mean, a little bit of spoilers for New Moon. He gets super, super buff because the whole werewolf thing. And so they wanted someone young for the first movie, and we're going to recast someone older and like more built. And so he just worked out a whole lot and ended up like Kristen Stewart like talked to them and said that he should really be in it and stuff. And yeah, I just cannot imagine them recasting, especially after the first movie, like, and people's reaction to Jacob. Like,
yeah.
And also in the first movie, he's not even attractive. That wig man, like, so bad.
No, it's so bad. It's so bad. Yeah. No, it would be such a different movie, and I wonder if we would have had as much like Team Jacob, Team Edward, because okay, here's like genuinely
a lot more Team Edward people.
Yeah, no, genuinely, because I remember being confused in high school. Like, the books do not make it like an even competition. It's not. It's like feels in my memory. Granted, remember, I haven't read this since I was like 13, 14 years old, but in my memory, there was not like a dramatic love triangle. Like, there's like a slight baby one, and it's not even like Bella is never like so into Jacob in any, or like super torn. Like, she's pretty solidly Edward the whole time.
I think there is like a love triangle in a sense, but it's more a line and then a little dashed line from Jacob to Bella because he has feelings for her. And she like has like feelings for him, but not romantic feelings. Like she cares about him.
She's like, I love you as a friend.
Yeah, which we get
You're my best friend here.
Established in these chapters that we read.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And interesting, I did make note of the fact that she's kind of flirting with him to get more information out of him about the Cullens, which also is just interesting. One, like the time that she's kind of leaning into that is, just to get information about Edward. So anyways, thought that was interesting.
And that doesn't come across quite as clearly in the movies. Although watching the movies now after reading the book, I'm like, oh yeah, you can see that's what she's doing. But as someone who has watched the movies more frequently and hasn't read the book in 16 years or however long it's been, I totally forgot that part.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think, that's one situation where like it has nothing to do with like the acting. Like there's just no way to like, unless you do a voiceover of her inner thoughts, you can't convey like, oh, that I'm feeling like a little guilty about this, you know? So anyways, yeah, so that's the big news. Jacob reveals that the Cullens are vampires, that they don't hunt humans is the other big thing he says, and that they have been alive for a super, super long time.
He really lays it out in the book compared to the movie. You get that like flashback of the movie, but it isn't like explicitly him telling her like these people have been alive for at least 70 years. Like
right. It's like he's laying out vibes in the movie, straight facts in the book. He's like, this is how it is. Ding, 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 ding. And then, you know, he gets a little nervous and Bella's trying to like kind of like be like, oh no, you're just a great storyteller. But obviously she knows. She knows now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also just have a note in this chapter about how I thought that some of the stuff that happened with like Jacob and them introducing him was a reason that I was team Jacob, because they just get so along so well from the start, and Bella is getting all these weird mixed signals from Edward, and I'm just like, not about that. just go with the guy that you get along with from the beginning, not the one who you think might want to kill you. You know? I don't know. That's just me.
I don't know. I love an enemies to lovers. I just love it. I love the enemies to lovers. The mystery is so good.
I like reading enemies to lovers. In real life, that would not happen with me. Absolutely not.
Okay, I was talking to Will. Will is my husband for podcast listeners, and he has recently started reading some of the romantasy books I've been into, and he does know the trope that I love enemies to lovers, and like all these mysterious guys in all these books, which is not Will's vibe. But
enemies when you met? What?
Okay, but then he was pointing out that we kind of were enemies to lovers when we broke up, because we broke up for 2 years and then we had to keep seeing each other around our college campus, and then finally like started talking. And I was like, it was like thrilling for me, like the tension and the like everything built up. Ugh.
That's where it all stems.
Anyways.
Well, I guess it all stems from Twilight, because that's the original enemies to lovers in your life, because you read it before you met Will.
Yeah. And okay, here is the other thing that I have realized is I have a really strong bias towards whoever characters fall in love with first. The big exception being A Court of Thorns and Roses, where I did not feel that way. But I often like reference Twilight as like one of the books where I just have such a strong bias for the first person she is in love with. And I did marry my high school sweetheart, so that checks.
Yeah,
that checks.
I definitely I get that. But you know, I've kind of realized that Twilight, like, I just am not as much into like Edward and Bella's love story as other love stories in fantasy books. And I think it's because it takes place in what is a completely seemingly normal world. And so it's like more difficult for me to get past like the weird things, and like I can see myself being more in Bella's shoes versus other fantasy books. It's like it's more like a whole different world kind of thing that they're immersed in. And this, I'm like, yeah, if this happened to me, I would not be feeling this way. So
yeah, that is interesting also, because Twilight like is barely even soft fantasy. I think I'm doing these terms right, where hard fantasy is like totally magical world, totally separate. Think Lord of the Rings, you know, things like that. Soft fantasy is like Harry Potter, where it's like there is magic, but it's like just hidden in our normal world. And so Twilight is like, yeah,
just going into soft.
yeah, yeah, it's like barely, barely there. So yeah, that makes sense. It is interesting. Yeah, I'm obsessed. Most of my notes are just me being obsessed with them. So love that we are about to diverge.
We're like,
in
I never knew about this. So
that's
one
hilarious.
note that I have that we would both agree on, though, is that I retract last week. I think I said Jessica is the worst. Lauren is in fact the worst.
Lauren is the worst.
That's just not in the movies because she's the worst.
The worst. And Tim, what's his name? Tom? I don't even know his name. Tyler, also the worst.
Yeah. They are both the worst.
They deserve each other in their worstness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's start
my notes, making sure I covered everything for this chapter, and
let's
note about when Jacob tells about the how the Cullens are vampires, and my comment is Jacob just casually breaking a multi-generational treaty by telling a story to a girl he just met.
Yeah, truly.
Pretty accurate.
Yeah. My only other note is I remember in episode 1, we talked about we weren't sure if she remembered Jacob or not. And she does address that in this section, which is she remembers his 2 older sisters, but not him.
Are not existent in the movies.
Yep.
And also, I don't know why it was in my head that Billy was not his father and was just like a father figure and was like an uncle or something.
Yeah.
I have no idea why I thought that. I don't think it's like established specifically in the movies that is his dad, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. It's just vague, I feel like.
Yeah.
Anyways. All right. So, chapter 7 of Twilight, Bella heads home from the beach. She can't stop thinking about what the tea that Jacob has spilt. And like any reasonable human, she starts Googling to figure out, like, I don't know, she does some fact checking. Yeah, also that she gets home and then has to put on like super loud music to try to like drown out her own thoughts. So relatable. So relatable. That is me to a T.
I also thought it was pretty funny how much detail Stephanie Meyer went into about how she opened the webpage. I'm like, this seems very 2005 to me. Like, we don't need this much explanation. But
we've all been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very 2005 coded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, she, in between that, she falls asleep after listening to the music, and she has the nightmare also about, in her nightmare, Jacob is a werewolf. Oh, yeah, we didn't even talk about that. Jacob also drops the tea. He does not say he's a werewolf. He doesn't say werewolves are real or there, but he says his tribe descended from werewolves is the legend. So that's another key thing to know.
Now, I have some thoughts about this because it's always kind of been my impression that Jacob is not aware at this point that there are werewolves because he's not yet a werewolf. We learned that in, I think, New Moon, that he's going to get a werewolf because he transitions like later.
Right.
But my only thing is, like, when we do see him become a werewolf, there are younger members of the tribe who are aware of it, who I believe are not yet werewolves. So I'm a little confused as to how do you keep that secret within the tribe? I don't know. Anyway, but just
that's interesting. I like that theory. As I'm reading, especially more as we get into like New Moon specifically, I'll be aware of like what way I'm leaning, because I've always thought he definitely knows there's werewolves in his tribe, but he's like keeping it secret out of like family loyalty.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's 100% canon, but I feel like it's definitely implied because it's once again in New Moon, so a little bit of spoilers for that. But he talks about how like Sam, who's like the older guy who like that alpha of the pack or whatever, is like giving him weird looks and things about how he's like next or something. And I don't know, but yeah, yeah, I don't know for sure if it. Anyway, something
Yeah.
to keep in mind as we read and watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this dream you're talking about, I feel like
Yes.
it is not very subtle about the fact that Bella is picking Edward over Jacob. Because at one point,
Yeah. Overtly.
she's not even concerned in this dream about where Edward is about to attack Jacob. She's not concerned about Jacob getting attacked. She's concerned about Edward potentially getting hurt when he attacks him.
They're attacking each other though, right?
Yeah, it kind
like
of they're attacking each other, but it's kind of Edward is about to make this like first move on like I think I can't remember exactly what happens, but I think it's like he's making sure that like Bella's being defended, and so he makes like the first move in the fight. So
got you. Yeah, so in the dream, Edward is a vampire, Jacob is a werewolf, they fight. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that she wakes up. So then she's freaked out, waking up from that nightmare, starts Googling away, looks up all these different vampire myths from around the world. There's a bunch of different stuff. And what I think is interesting is after she calms down a little bit, she then is like, oh, that dream is like the fear from the legend Jacob told me influencing my picture of Edward. It's not how I view Edward, or it's not actually Edward. That's just like the influence of this fear over me, which is so interesting. And again, could go two ways, right? Depending on what your perspective is with Edward and Bella. Like for me, I'm like that, like, it's I always think about in this book, the creepy or cute from How I Met Your Mother. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I vaguely remember. Yeah, because they have like a scale of the like creepy or cute one, or maybe I'm thinking.
Yeah, so it's basically, it's like a thing where like if you do something and the other person is also into you, then it like looks like this grand romantic gesture. And if you do the same thing, but the person is not into you, it looks like you're a creepy stalker, you know? And I just keep thinking about that in this book. And it's funny because that's our perspectives on it. And so again, this is me like in that moment being like, that's so like intuitive of Bella to be like, oh, I'm placing this like fear people think I should have, but that's not really Edward. I know him. But the flip side is she's gaslighting herself. And like your subconscious warning you.
She has not talked to him enough to know him. Like that's also part of it.
She's got the vibes.
And like you've known him a couple months in high school and have mostly talked to him in biology class in the cafeteria. And for a solid month he was completely ignoring you. But yeah. I have a note here from this chapter about Bella is talking about how there's only two practical options, and one of them is to listen to Jacob and take his advice to avoid Edward as much as possible and to cancel their plans and all that kind of thing. And then the other option is to not do that pretty much. I am just like, I so disagree with Bella's decision to just not, like, I would 100% not talk to Edward anymore if I figured out that he was a vampire. Like, absolutely not. I just, can't get on board, man.
This is so funny because I just have the opposite reaction. I'm so into it. Like,
this is what the people want. They want Team Edward versus Team Jacob.
Yeah, I love that it's coming through still.
I am Team Jacob still.
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting. No, I'm so into it. I love them. I love him. I love it. Oh man. I do also think, again, going with that idea that Bella she's really choosing, it's that idea like we all have gut reactions and then we look for information that supports our gut reactions to things, like that's kind of how we make decisions as people. And that's what she's doing, Googling also. So both she decides she's gonna see Edward. She's not gonna ignore him. She decides that her nightmare is just about the fear Jacob has instilled in her. And then she finds, of the hundreds of vampire myths, she finds one where they're nice. And she's like, done.
I thought that was pretty funny.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
I also just think the relatability when Bella, then after she makes her decision, she says, like, she's just so relieved because she's like, all the anxiety is what I should choose. And now I just get to like live it out. I was like, relatable.
About my exact words are, I strongly relate to this. And it's highlighting her talking about making decisions being the painful part and the part you agonize over versus when you make the decision, you just go through with it. And I'm like, I so relate to that 100%. Yeah. Although my decision would be Jacob, as we have established.
I'm with Bella again, but okay. I also am I'm such a like vibes gut reaction person. Like I literally am like, if I was Bella and I'm calling you up, Amy, as my best friend to tell you about this guy, you would be like, I don't know, Callie. Like, and I would 100% not listen to you and be full throttle anyways. Like, I think that's what's so fun about.
Don't have to worry about this.
Me too. He's a good one. But no, there's nothing. I just can't stop. So funny. But it literally like it makes it like more fun to talk about then, because it is just, gosh, it's so funny. Okay. Anyways, I feel like we've talked about this long enough.
I also have another chapter about Bella talking about opening her bedroom window and was surprised that it opened silently without sticking. I'm like, yeah, that's because the creep is coming up to your window every night and oiled it so it wouldn't make as much noise. I just can't get past these details. I just can't.
It's so fair.
You said we've talked enough about this, and then I saw that note and I'm like, I have to talk about that.
No, it's so fair.
But I do have another note that is unrelated to Edward versus Jacob. And it's about Charlie. And then there's a little paragraph about Charlie talking about how he smiled back at Bella. And I'll just read it. He smiled back, his brown eyes crinkling at the edges. When Charlie smiled, it was easier to see why he and my mother had jumped quickly into an early marriage. Most of the young romantic he had been in those days had faded before I'd known him, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but I wrote in a note here saying, hot take, that might not be much of a hot take, that Charlie is the hottest man in Twilight. I really am Team Charlie, but yeah.
Okay, because Team Charlie is such a thing on the internet right now, I have been watching the Team Charlie thirst trap TikToks. It doesn't do it for me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I was talking like back when I first watched this, I would not see any appeal at all. But now I'm like,
yeah,
Charlie. Yeah,
yeah, I love that. Yeah, for me, still, it's it's not there for me yet. But we can check in another, 14 years or whatever. See where we're at then.
The next Twilight book comes out.
Right, exactly. Okay, so the next big thing. So Bella goes back to school. The Cullens are not there because of the sunshine.
But she still hasn't pieced together, even though she knows they're vampires. I don't know. That surprised me a little that she hadn't put that together. But
yeah, I was surprised that she didn't comment on it, because obviously she's not 100% sold at this point that he is a vampire, even though she's pretty convinced. Yeah, but I was surprised there was no comment on it. And I think later when she's talking, when her and Edward are talking in the car about it, then it's almost like she thought he couldn't go in daylight at all, regardless of how much sun there is. Like he just couldn't be up during the day, maybe. So that's kind of where I was like,
vampire things, you know.
Yeah, like maybe that's where it comes from. But yeah, so she's bummed the Cullens are not in school. And then the other big thing that happens in this chapter is Mike asks Bella out on a date. And she says, no, because wouldn't that be awkward because I'm friends with Jessica? Like, really, she's so good at subtly just de-escalating these things, you know?
I do appreciate that she's a little less subtle, being like, Mike, how are you not seeing this? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. She is like, what do you mean you don't get that Jessica, you didn't know that already, that she's into you? Is pretty funny. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But those are kind of the big things that are Twilight chapter 7 there. Any final notes from you, Amy, before we jump to Midnight Sun chapter 8 next?
No, I don't really have anything else.
Okay, so Midnight Sun chapter 8, literally my first note. Eddie Boy is obsessed with her, and I am here for it.
Oh boy, let's see what my first note is. My first note is in response to him saying, I hovered invisible in the shadows where I could follow the object of my love and obsession, where I could see her and hear her in the minds of the lucky humans who could walk through the sunlight beside her, sometimes accidentally brushing the back of her hand with their own. And I said, that just kind of creeps me out. We are on different pages.
We are. That's hilarious.
And I will try not to dwell on it this chapter, because this could get really old, but this chapter just creeps me out a lot. So
I was so into it every minute, but I did skip.
Oh, he's in the tree reading over her shoulder unknowingly. That's so creepy. I also just hate being unknowingly watched like that. I hate that. Yeah.
I don't know. I literally didn't think it was weird when I read it.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
It's going to damage our friendship. Thank goodness we've made it 29 years, and Twilight is what divides.
Twilight's going to be the thing that ends it. You wanted a podcast so bad, Callie. It was just to really end our friendship. So this is a really appropriate time for me to have to wipe my eye right now.
Yeah, it's dramatic. Okay, I did, to be honest, I skipped over. I don't have a lot of notes for Edward. Like basically, I'm like, he's just obsessed with her. This whole chunk of time, he's all about following her all the time. I mean, that continues kind of in this chapter, as well as the next 2, where he's so anxious when he can't be with her. That's kind of where we're at. And then my notes actually pick up when he's back at the house and interacting with his family again.
Yeah, the only thing that I have of any kind of note really before that isn't just me being creeped out is the fact that this is supposed to be one of the sunny days, and it was always under my impression, reading Twilight from Bella's perspective, that when they had sunny days that they went away somewhere or were just at their house, but he's stalking Bella. And I'm like, wouldn't you try to be more careful and hide since you're all sparkly? I don't know. But that was just something that kind of surprised me that didn't expect.
Yeah. 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 I also was like, yeah, just assumed they stayed at home or went somewhere else. Like, I was not thinking like he was following her in the shadows.
Yeah, like he's still out and about in town, but
Yeah. Yeah. Which is also, I mean, I will say, like, there's a little bit of a discrepancy there where, like, he won't get out of the car in Port Angeles later because there's still some sun out, but he's like okay going around town here. You know, like, it just, I don't know. I'm even normally somebody who can like make arguments for a lot of those kind of things to be like, well, he knows that town versus this one. But it does feel like, yeah, they're just different. I don't know. Yeah, different standards. Anyways,
I also think it is like something like to justify it. Like I think Port Angeles is supposed to be a bigger town, so it's like harder to not be seen, I would think. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and he is mostly just like in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it seems like Bella
Or
lives
hiding in a
on the
tree, you know.
woods.
Like
Yeah.
so.
Edward lives in the woods. Maybe there's just woods between their house.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay, but I love, again, my favorite parts of Midnight Sun. I will say this was the first week that the dual POV started to get to me a little bit. Like, I found I just was like not as into like Edward's chapters when it was the direct dialogue. Like, I just didn't want to read the same dialogue again, you know?
I was going to say the same thing. It was just like there was a lot of dialogue in the chapters between the two of them, so you didn't get as much new information.
Yeah, I think that's probably like an important distinction. And this was just a really dialogue heavy section. So yeah, it did feel like a lot more of a repeat. So I was skimming, like, my notes for Midnight Sun are a lot less for all of these chapters. And basically the only things I'm making notes of are the things that are like dramatically different or Edward's in a different place. I don't have almost any notes on their dialogue. Kind of for the next couple. But that to say, back at the house, everybody's so freaking annoyed with him. And I just love it. The family dynamics have been my favorite part of Midnight Sun, hands down. Yeah. Like, I love getting to hear everyone's thoughts. Stephanie Myers did such a good job. I think, like, it's just so relatable. The siblings are like annoyed, you know, like they either think he's like crazy being so protective or just being like dumb. You know, Esme is like starting to get a little concerned about him. Like, it's just, yeah, accurate family dynamics. Mm-hmm. So I love that.
I agree.
Okay, the other thing I note is we talked a lot about the order that they get turned into vampires. And so I specifically made note that it in this section also talks about Jasper was turned in the later half of the 19th century. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about that in the context of his brother is there. And this is the first time we're seeing Jasper's brother. I'm doing like air quotes because they're not actually brothers. It's who he like lived with before the Cullens. And yeah, so him and his vampire partner are at their house. They have very limited interactions with Edward. They think he's real weird. And then they leave. And that's kind of the extent of our interactions with them at this point.
Yeah. Oh, I was just trying to think of this and put this together. I was like, wait, so Jasper was turned in the latter half of the 19th century. And then Edward wasn't turned until after that, in like almost 1920, I think it was.
Okay.
And at first I was like, wait, wasn't Jasper turned the most recently? But it must be that he was the newest addition to their family. So he has been a vegetarian, quote unquote, for the least
amount of time.
So that makes sense.
Okay. Yep. It's all pulling together. Mm-hmm. That section, Dallas, is for you, fact checking us. My friend Dallas had a lot of notes for me. And by a lot, I mean an hour's worth of notes.
I love it. I want to hear it.
I know. He thought it was too long to send an email. And I said, you don't know Amy. She wants it.
I do.
Yes. But a lot of the things she fact checked us on were just things we hadn't read yet. So that was good. Yeah. So we've set the record straight now. We now know definitively. Great. Mm-hmm. Anyways,
yes. We have not read this in 16 years. So we will not remember everything.
Of all the information I can remember from when I was 13, my Twilight facts, well, unfortunately, higher than they should be in the scheme of, like, I don't know, science, different math things. But not perfect by any means. Yeah, Edward is super nervous about these two, the two vampires. Okay, can I just do my theory as someone who has very little recollection of the real plot of this book?
Sure.
Okay, great. So when Alice was like, what's his face and what's her face are coming. Sorry, I read this like hours ago and I'm like, why can't I remember their names?
Peter and I want to say Charlotte. Peter and Charlotte.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I instinctively was like, aha, Peter and Charlotte are the vampires who are going to come and try to kill Bella, and they're going to hunt her in the woods, and it's going to be like a whole thing. But I don't know now. I don't know. Maybe they say something else. Anyways, I'm just putting out my theory thus far with zero.
To say anything about it, to either confirm or deny? No. Okay.
Go. No, you can. Well, no, because I was going to say you can say if I'm right, but then if you don't say anything, I know I'm wrong.
That is how that works.
Don't say anything yet. We'll come back to it. We'll find out.
Well, we did see a little bit in the movie relating to that. About what this other side plot animal attack thing going on. So we saw why don't you explain what happened, because I don't want to say too much by accident.
No, I watched the movie a lot. I watched the movie first, so I don't. No, it's okay. You can go if I figure out and we confirm in this moment.
I'll try not to say too much. I don't think I'll say too much. We see 3 people who are presumed to be vampires. That was the one thing that I was just like, should I say that? But I'm sure you got that they were vampires. Who kill a guy who Charlie is friends with and knows, that we briefly get introduced to in the movie, but is not in the books.
Right.
And so we just get introduced to them, and we get one of their names is James, and then there's 2 other ones, a man and a woman. Mm-hmm. So that's all we have. So your theory is potentially that the man and the woman are, what are their names?
Yeah. Okay. But this is where I am like,
do you think Peter and Charlotte are different people, maybe? Or
that's what I don't know, because I have memories from the movie before. I remembered once you were like, don't you remember the plot? Then I was like, oh, and I remembered James's face. Mm-hmm. But now I'm like, wait, but is that them or not? I don't know again. I don't know. So anyways.
Won't say anything.
Okay, great. We keep on going.
No, I'm not going to say anything. That would spoil something. Never mind. Okay.
Where is it that she walks in the woods by herself? I swore I made a note of that, but now I'm seeing it. Oh, it's in Twilight chapter 7. It's the next. No. I just missed it. It was in the last chapter. I did make a note and I was like, she's walking in the woods by herself. Because then I thought maybe that was when the vampires were going to attack her.
Mm-hmm.
No. Again,
they make it like it's this really big deal about her going off in the woods by herself, and then nothing happens.
Right. But then later, Edward specifically says, don't go into the woods by yourself.
Mm-hmm. Which when he says that, I had questions, because I think we see him say that first in Twilight, and then we read about it more in Midnight Sun. But I had the question of if he was warning her because of werewolves or because of vampires. Like, did he think the werewolves were going to attack for some reason? Or was he warning vampires?
I thought it was the vampires.
He does kind of clarify in Midnight Sun that it was vampires that he was worried about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think he, like, you just get the vibes he's so unnerved that Bella is not afraid of him. It really freaks him out. Like, and so I think he's just like, he has zero trust that she'll run from danger, which we're about to get into in the next chapter. Yeah.
And this all confirms again something that I've been saying, I think, since week 1 about Bella having bad instincts, and I am standing by that.
Yeah, I mean, fair. It's a fair criticism. I just don't want to, I'm like, I don't know why I don't want to criticize her, because, again, she's not even my favorite protagonist.
Yeah. But I think like they're supposed to show that she has bad instincts, and like that's part of the reason she's like not afraid of Edward, like, which is not necessarily a criticism. I mean, I obviously don't agree with it, but
right. But I think that's why I'm like, I don't want to say she has bad instincts. One, I've clearly agreed with her in like so many of these.
I think I don't want to agree that you have bad instincts.
I have phenomenal instincts. Okay. But I do think it like in some ways discredits, like, because I want it to be like, no, she like has good instincts, and that's why she like sees a truer version of Edward than he sees in himself. Like, she knows like that there's more goodness than like evil in him, even though Edward doesn't. And I just like that version more, but also like her actions, particularly in this next chapter, like it is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of dumb, but then also she defends it and she's like, I'm a terrible runner, I trip a lot. Like,
yeah, I get what you're saying, and I totally get that perspective, and like about her seeing the good in Edward. I think that's a valid thing, and like when you look at it at a deeper level, maybe she does have good instincts in a certain way. But I think when I'm thinking of instincts, I'm just thinking of like basic human instincts, fight or flight kind of thing, and that sometimes you should run away if you are.
Yeah, she's kind of a freeze. She's not like a fight or flight. She's a freeze person.
Yeah.
Which signifies a deeper level of trauma. Again, going along with my parentified childhood. Mm-hmm. I don't think Stephanie Meyers necessarily intentionally was writing that deep of a backstory for her, but it checks. It checks.
Yeah. I think she definitely was somewhat, because it like talked about in Midnight Sun about like how they talk about specifically earlier about how Bella seems like a parent in the relationship between her and her mother. So
yeah, for sure.
Ready to move on to Twilight chapter 8.
We've already alluded. Yeah. So Twilight chapter 8 starts with dress shopping. Bella and Angela and Anna Kendrick. Jessica. Oh my gosh. Oh, my memory today. In between reading the 2 chapters from last week, and then I read an entire book. I read all of The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, and then read the end of this. And so I feel like there's a million character names bouncing around in my head today. Anyways, for Jessica, the 3 of them go up to Port Angeles, and they're going dress shopping for the spring dance. Very cute. I liked a lot the comment where She's annoyed that she has to explain why she's going with her friends dress shopping to Charlie. And she's like, I would never have to explain this to a woman. Like,
Yeah. That was pretty funny. And then Charlie just kind of like accepts that and is like, this is something I don't understand. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I just love all these little side pieces, like all the tiny, like, bonus interactions, because I think it just shows that Stephanie Myers does, like, she writes pretty consistent characters, that are, like, pretty real. So, anyways, I've just appreciated that more on this read. But, okay, so they go dress shopping. It's going great. And then the girls split up. And Bella's going to go check out a bookstore. She runs in to some super creepy dudes who we're led to believe are going to physically assault her in some way. They don't overtly say. But you get the vibe. They're super bad, super evil dudes, particularly then from Edward's perspective. Again, nothing is overtly said in the book, and I feel like we won't say anything for triggering reasons on the podcast. But definitely bad dudes following her. And she kind of like avoids them. And then she notices she's walking. She's trying to find this bookstore. She can't find it. And then she notices two of them are following her. And actually, they've kind of herded her back around. And now she's around these four guys and kind of trapped again and starting to get a little panicked, a little freeze again, like we said, and a little bit like she's trying to think about how to fight them.
So yeah, does have some fight, not just freeze.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Also interesting in the movie that she does in fact begin to fight them, but not in the book.
Right. True. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we have the very dramatic move, which I think would have been so much more dramatic if you hadn't been, like, I imagine it was like a big like shock when I read it the first time, because we obviously know Edward has followed her from his POV. Like, we know he's planning on going up. So then when this fight is about to happen and Edward whips up in his car, it would have been like a bigger reveal than we definitely know he's already there. It is in the Twilight section. She does note that she sees the same make of his car parked somewhere in the city earlier. But that's the only like hint that you get that Edward's up there following her. So yeah, he saves her. And then he's livid. He's so pissed. He wants to go murder the dudes. And he is like, Bella, I need you to like talk about other stuff to distract me. Basically, so I don't go kill these people. So she talks, to distract him, she talks about how she is going to run over Tyler with her car because he started telling everyone they're going to prom together. It's just, the banter. We get into it. Mm-hmm. I want to know how creeped out are you by this section? Like, is his, like, bloodlust, is that also, like, this is creepy for you? Or is that, like, this is hot?
Definitely not the latter. But I did have a comment here about how when she gets in the car and is talking about how, like, her like fear vanished and all of a sudden felt very secure. And I commented saying that I feel like Edward saving her here is supposed to make us like him and view him as a hero, but he's only there because he's stalking her. So that was kind of my feelings about the thing. But yeah. So I'm still not on board. And then, he's so incredibly mad, and like I get that he's mad, but why is he taking it out on her, it seems like. So I just don't follow. I don't get it. Like, I get it, but I don't know.
See, I did not read it thinking he was taking it out on her. And again, because maybe I had that belief, I didn't feel like that's how Bella perceived it. Like, I just thought he was like so mad he couldn't think about anything else. So he was just being like very short, like he's concentrating on this other thing.
Yeah.
And like can't really talk because he's like blinded by his rage, which again you get more of in his POV in Midnight Sun. But yeah, that's how I took it more than like it was overtly trying to like slight Bella or taking him out.
And I don't think he was intentionally
like, for sure not
like do that. But like just from my view, it's like, okay, Bella is the one who just like went through this, but you're the one freaking out. And I get that Bella wasn't freaking out, but like I feel like he doesn't even really give her an opportunity to, is kind of how I saw it.
Yeah.
I also get
and then
how
he kind of
it differently.
Yeah, and then he kind of freaks out. No, I think that's true. He doesn't give her a chance, and then he kind of freaks out that she's not freaking out later, and thinks like she's in shock and is like, you need to eat because like you're not in shock, you know?
I think this chapter just bothered me because it seemed like he was being like controlling about how she should be feeling in a situation, and that bugged me. So
yeah. No, that's a thing that would 1,000,000% bother me in real life or in any interactions with real people. And while reading this, I was like, classic. Another example of Edward being baffled that Bella is not a stereotypical human.
Yeah.
And you do get the vibes. Like, honestly, Edward needs therapy because he both hates vampires, hates himself, but also has a pretty terrible view of humans. You know, he's not like so, like, you don't get the sense that he's really pining for being a human again either, but which is interesting.
I totally understand that viewpoint because imagine if you went from being a human to being a vampire who could then read everyone's minds, and you read everyone's minds all the time. I think I would hate most humans.
Like, yeah, and read everyone's minds, and you're stuck in a high school again and again and again, like 17-year-olds' minds.
Why you wouldn't like humans?
Yeah, that's valid. That's valid. But I just feel like it's so sad. He doesn't. There's no joy in his life.
That is true. I agree with you on that. I do have a note about they go to dinner. They run into, or I guess they meet up kind of with Angela and Jessica, and they already had dinner, so they leave. And Edward says that he'll drive her home. So they have dinner, or Bella has dinner, and Edward watches.
Edward has a Coke.
Yeah. And they have this little dialogue about Bella says like, you really shouldn't do that to people, and he's like, what? And she's like, dazzle them like that. And I'm like, how did they not include this dialogue in the movie? I love this dialogue, and I would have loved to see that in the movie.
The memes would have been priceless.
Yeah, I would have loved that.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would have made the scene a bit lighter, because I feel like in the movie the scene of them at dinner seems really intense, and it's not intense in the books, but there's more lighter parts, you know?
Yeah. It is, I mean, in defense of the movie, which I think I will maybe never do again, because I prefer the book so dramatically. Even just like 13-year-old me preferred the books dramatically. So I do feel like it's a little like weird. And again, not in a way that I think the writing doesn't pull it off necessarily, but it is kind of funny. Like, she went through this very scary thing. She's not shaken up, but then she's like just baffled that the waitress thinks he's hot. Feels like such a different tone. Like, and also everyone thinks he's hot. I don't know. Like, in the book, you really are like, that's the whole thing. Every human woman is in love with him. And like, yeah, it's just a very different tone. And then it's like, oh, and I know you're a vampire, you know? So I do feel like it's more consistent to go from like life or death moment to then like we're going to have a real talk. And like, almost like in the movie, you kind of get the idea more that going through this traumatic thing kind of like, you know, makes her more willing to like say the hard thing and like say what she's afraid of and be like, you're a vampire, you know, which I do respect that choice. I think that's solid.
Yeah. And I do think it makes sense for the movie to have gone more that way, since you don't get Jacob explicitly saying they're vampires. So then it kind of like shows this more like lead up to why she's thinking that, and like giving her the courage to say it, kind of thing. So
yeah, for sure. Okay, and then again, everything in the dinner date, lots going on there. But the scene specifically where she is like, why you're not normally this crabby when your eyes are light, and that she notices that, I was like, oh, gold again. We all know I'm just here for the banter between Edward and Bella. I'm obsessed. But yeah, so I loved that, absolutely. And that he's so shocked she notices.
I'm shocked he's shocked. He's said so many times about how observant she is. I was kind of surprised that he was surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where we're like, more people should notice that. It's weird he doesn't wear contacts, you know, like we talked about that in whatever episode previously.
I also get it, because I feel like the color of people's eyes is talked about a lot in like books and things, and I do not think I notice many people's eye colors unless they have like really striking eyes, you know? I mean, maybe, but
yeah. I'm trying to think of people I really notice their eye color, and I'm like, I feel like I just comment on your eyes a lot.
Because they're striking.
They're striking. They're so blue. Every time
that's what I typically notice. If someone has like really blue or like green eyes, then I tend to notice. But sometimes like, there's like more muted blue, or I don't know. I don't necessarily notice people's eye color. Although if someone had black eyes, I'd probably notice that.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Anyways. But I was living for that scene. And then, okay, this is my note here is then Edward admits that he was stalking Bella, and she is happy about it. And my note is, okay, I do think Bella should be concerned.
Okay, we're on the same page. Good to know.
What?
I said, okay, we're on the same page. Good to know.
Okay, just wait. I said, but if I was Bella, I probably would have reacted the same way. Like,
okay, I gotta pull up my note here because I'm pretty sure I have a note on the exact same thing that is quite different.
It makes sense.
Yeah. I guess my comment here wasn't that strong. I said about it's a good thing that Bella's instincts aren't great, because most girls would have been creeped out by this behavior. But maybe that's just me protecting my own feelings, because you would not, apparently. But
I don't know, apparently not.
But I think I have Dallas on my side. So, of our listeners that are contributing.
Yes. Yeah, let's do a poll on Instagram on like Tuesday when this goes live, and say, would you be creeped out by Edward stalking you? Yes or no? Yes or no? I love
it. We'll do it.
Yeah. Okay, so everyone please go, if you're listening on Twilight Tuesday, check the Instagram stories and vote. Okay. Yeah, so that's the end of my notes for chapter 8. And then jumping into Midnight Sun 9, unless you have any more thoughts.
No, that was all that I had.
Okay, great. I will say the end of this chapter in Twilight was the first big, like, kind of cliffhanger-y moment for me, where I really wanted to just keep reading Twilight. Like, I didn't want to switch over because I just wanted to continue. It ends with them being in the car. Yeah. And asking more questions. So yeah, since I was clearly living for this scene, it makes sense. I wanted it to continue. Anyways, jumping over to Midnight Sun 9. Again, a lot less notes because it's mostly dialogue. And so we've kind of talked about a lot of what's going on. But I do like the beginning of this chapter. You know, we had talked before about the irony of Edward being so judgy of the humans until he's doing that behavior with Bella himself, right? And now you have the same thing where he has been so judgy. He comments that he's been so judgy towards his brothers and their different behaviors, and like he always valued him being the responsible one, and now he is like, I'm being more unhinged than the rest of them. Like, this is crazy, and he acknowledges that. So yeah. Yeah. Oh, no idea what this note means, but my main note is just his insane anxiety about not knowing where he is once Edward realizes she's separated from the two girls, is pretty intense. And then, yeah, no idea. I have a bunch of random letters in one of my notes, so don't know what that means. But yeah, I think then, you know, it's the fight and then it's dialogue from there on out. So yeah. Not tons of notes.
Really don't have many notes on it. And the one thing that I commented on was I was a little surprised when they're talking at the restaurant and they're talking about new theories as to what Edward is. And Bella says that she has a new one that she didn't come up with completely on her own. And I was shocked he didn't immediately ask who else like was contributing to that. But he does later on. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Jumping over to
back to Twilight.
Next chapter. Yeah, back to Twilight. Twilight chapter 9. First note, Bella seemingly does not care he's a vampire. Like, she really doesn't. And again, I mean, that does go with the, like, she made the decision, and now she's just living it out. None of her business. Like, she made her choice, you know, but it is like, she's just so unreactive, playing it so cool. And I wish we got a little more of her internal dialogue of being like, how much is she like trying to just like, she's trying to impress Edward or like be whatever. So like, she's trying to play it super cool. I think would have been a more interesting and like realistic choice than just like, you kind of get the sense reading it, she actually has no reaction to this.
Yeah.
Which,
go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't think that specifically is like that realistic to her character even, you know, like I wasn't about it.
Yeah, I had a note here about they're talking about what is myths about being vampires, like that you can't be out in the sun at all, or well, I mean during daylight, I should say, not out in the sun.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And then he talks about how he can't sleep. And that takes her by surprise and is like something she kind of dwells on. And like, you kind of went right past the fact that he's a vampire and confirmed that. Yeah. And you're just like, and he don't sleep? Like,
you're and not he even kind of makes fun of her, right? Sorry, yes, what? Because then he's like, he even kind of makes fun of her because then he is like, wait, but you haven't asked about the big one, my diet, you know? Like, Edward is even like, come on, like, get to the pressing question.
Yeah. I also had a note in this because this is where Edward does ask about who was coming up with this theory with her, and she talks about how Jacob told her this story, and I'm like, okay, you just promised Jacob you wouldn't tell anybody that he told you that, and here you are telling somebody. But she does kind of realize that and is worried about protecting Jacob for a second there, which I feel like is important to note that she does care about Jacob, but not in the way Jacob might like her to.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and this was another note I had in that section where, Bella is trying to backtrack a little bit and like kind of cover Jacob uh, because she realizes she's revealed this and it's maybe a big deal that he told her. And part of it is then she is telling Edward about how she like kind of flirted and coerced him a little bit to give him the information when they were away from other people and blah blah blah. And Edward thinks it's kind of funny to imagine her flirting with him. And then he kind of is like, oh yeah, like poor Jacob, like he didn't have a chance, kind of is the vibe. But like, again, it's one of those things where if you like Edward, I feel like that's a cute moment. And if you don't like Edward, that feels like very patronizing to me, that you're like, oh, that must have been cute that you were like trying to like flirt or whatever.
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying, and when I I made a note in the Twilight chapters that I was excited to hear Edward's first thoughts of Jacob. Um, and that I wrote in the Midnight Sun chapter that I was a little disappointed that he just pitied Jacob because I wanted more drama. So, but I get like his thoughts around why he's kind of pitying him, and he also says that he doesn't. I mean, this is kind of getting in the Midnight Sun, but that he like doesn't blame him for like telling Bella about them being vampires, which I thought was interesting and not necessarily what I was expecting.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my big takeaways from this chapter specifically is that like Twilight is not a mystery, like it's really like I feel like the beginning couple chapters, that's kind of like the hook to get you in. Like it doesn't start with like an inciting incident or something like that. It's the mystery that's supposed to like grab you. Mm-hmm. But the mystery is resolved by what we're like 150 pages into each book now, about a little further, maybe closer to 200, somewhere in between. But we're not even.
I'm looking right now. 180 is the page we're on in Twilight of 500.
Okay.
So
yeah. So we're like not even halfway through, and kind of that big initial mystery is like you get all the answers. Like he's not being elusive. And the same way, like she doesn't choose to build up tension between Edward and Jacob in this moment. She is like, no, like they understand each other, and it is just really interesting how much like the structure of the story is changed by the genre you're writing, right? Because like it is like I just kept finding myself like surprised that, again, clearly I didn't remember the plot of Twilight. But I'm kind of surprised that they're just so overt about it, a little more than a quarter of the way through the book here. So, yeah. And just, like it's not a mystery.
I can't speak too much in detail without spoiling anything, but I feel like Twilight doesn't really follow your typical story structure with the plot because, or maybe it does, and the intro's just really long because we don't get to some of the stuff that happens later in the book until much later in the book. So
yeah, now I'm thinking about it is a little, I have to relook up like the 4-act story structure versus the 3-act story structure. The 4-act story structure is more common in like a lot of Eastern countries, and you see it a lot in anime, but it's like just a very different flow because like the climax happens a lot earlier and there's a lot more like after, like it's kind of like characters resolving stuff kind of then too. So I don't know, I'll have to look that up. I'll update for the next episode if I feel well, and I guess I'll have to finish the book because I don't remember everything.
I just did a quick Google of 4-act structure because I couldn't remember what it is. I'm definitely familiar with the concept, but I'm not good at memorizing those things. And it says that it's the first plot point, midpoint, third plot point, and climactic moment. So the climactic moment is at the end, which I feel like definitely follows closer to Twilight. So first
Yeah.
book, but
Yeah. Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, those are some of my biggest, honestly, notes from this chapter. And I didn't have a ton for chapter 10 either. I mean, they were a little shorter, but yeah, mostly just around like we're getting so many details and Edward is just being so overt and she's so unfazed. Like that's most of my reactions to these chapters.
Yeah. I do have, this is our last Twilight chapter of the week, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We do one more in Midnight Sun.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting too far ahead. My notes are a little disorganized, but the last thing that's said in this chapter is the most highlighted thing that we read this week, which I was not too surprised by, which is the last thing said in the chapter is about 3 things I was absolutely positive. First, Edward was a vampire. Second, there was a part of him, and I didn't know how potent that part might be, that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him.
Yeah. I did think that was going to be the most highlighted section. And as much as I've been 1,000,000% zero red flags for me personally throughout this whole interaction, I was like, little cheesy for me personally, but cute, whatever.
I also feel like that's highlighted. Obviously, it's significant. It is also one of the quotes that is like directly pulled into the movie.
Yep.
That is like one of the quotes when I think about Twilight that I think of. So
yeah. Okay, do you want to, anything else you want to talk about in Twilight 9, or you want to jump into Midnight Sun chapter 10 before we wrap up today's episode?
I'm good to jump into our last chapter.
Okay. It's another, dialogue heavy, and we already have talked some about Edward's reactions. I did also, have the notes about his reactions with Jacob and just him being kind of like, again, I guess I'm just surprised, like a lot of the characters have been really unfazed and there's a lot of drama and no one's really reacting, which just, is what it is, but is a little surprising.
Yeah, I really also did not take many notes on this chapter because, like you said, a lot of repetitive dialogue. And I already talked about how disappointed there wasn't more drama when he first introduced to Jacob, or not introduced, but talked about Jacob. I did kind of find it funny about how concerned Edward is that Bella is not more concerned about him being a vampire. And there was a particular line when he says that he stared back at her, anxious again about her mental health. Made me literally laugh out loud. So.
So true.
And then she smiles wider and he frowns at her. I'm like, it was pretty funny.
Another scene, like, again, I wish, like, that would have been such a good movie moment, except for Twilight in the movie is not doing, like, voiceovers like that, like, but again, like, so funny. Funny.
I also had a note, like, later on, he's, like, pondering about, like, the options in this situation and how, like, he's questioning if there's anything he could do now that wouldn't hurt her, because he can't just leave because she has feelings for him and he doesn't want to turn her into a vampire. And I'm just so frustrated at this point because I'm like, why were you not thinking of this earlier? Like, because I think it was just, like, kind of referenced earlier, and I was like, how do you not see where this is going? But yeah, that was just a frustration for me. But
I will say Edward, he's not your stereotypical main male lead who's like ancient, powerful, been alive for forever, because he's so baffled. Like, it really is like the first time he's falling in love. He got turned so young, you know, and so you do kind of see that, but it's really different than your other kind of immortal male characters you get in fantasy books, because he's so confused and he like is making kind of dumb choices when it comes to being in love with Bella, you know, like, and he's like pretty immature about it, like his anxiety around it, his like he can't anticipate like what's coming really. He's kind of being stubborn, trying to go against Alice's vision, you know. So it is, you get a little more the sense of like the 17-year-old he is, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I agree. And I think part of the reason like that he can't anticipate what's going to happen with Bella is he's so used to reading people's minds and knowing what's going to happen that when he can't read someone, he just like can't even think about what's going to happen. And he does seem to like get better about like expecting her to do certain things and being correct about them as he gets to know her better. Like,
yeah,
people do, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think they talk about that in the lunch scene where they're having lunch together for the first time in the Midnight Sun one. Is he is kind of acknowledging how rusty he is at like just reading people without like how much he's relying on being able to read their minds, and how he is like, it's like Bella is making him more observant in that way. Yeah. Anyways, interesting to see how it's gonna progress. And like, I have no memory of the rest of the book. So from here on out, it's all surprise. I'm like, oh, he's a vampire. Okay, great. That's where I stopped remembering the plot. Yeah. And I know where it ends, kind of. And I know from other people talking about it that like other stuff, I guess I won't say anything in case other people, we said we're going to try to mitigate spoilers. But yeah, like I know she gets hurt and that's part of what prompts his fleeing, which sets the stage for New Moon. So I'm piecing it together, but didn't remember that before. So anyways, all mystery from here on out. But yeah, what a good chunk. What a good chunk. We really moved a lot of plot points forward in this week.
I feel like you're starting to wrap it up, but I have some points we still need to talk about.
Great.
Here
after, Tell me.
We see most of this chapter is excuse me, is Edward's perspective of him and Bella and what they just had happen. But then he goes home and he talks to Carlisle.
Oh, yeah.
And is Carlisle planning to murder that man in Port Angeles? I'm like, what is happening? I do not remember this. I have no idea what is about to happen. So that's like a cliffhanger to me. And I'm like, I literally had a reaction and I'm like, am I not gonna like Carlisle anymore after this? Is he not gonna be my favorite anymore? Like, what is he gonna do? And yeah, I also have a note about when Edward goes to Carlisle and talks about this man in Port Angeles and about how he wants to like kill him. And Carlisle's response is, she's very good for you, isn't she? So much compassion, so much control. I'm impressed. And I'm like, that is an insane reaction to have when your son tells you he wants to murder someone.
Okay, but your son is a vampire and you all have murdered people.
I also I immediately on that comment about how much I love Carlisle. So I'm not mad about it, but it just made me laugh.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. I can't believe, clearly I stopped taking notes at the end of Midnight Sun. So, whoops.
That was mostly what I had. Oh, and Edward does talk a little bit about like, what is he saying? Something about how that Bella is deserving and needs a guardian angel. he makes a comment about guardian vampire. That's a stretch. It's pretty funny, and that's kind of where he ends his thoughts is about being her guardian vampire. So yeah,
we didn't talk a ton about, but the theme of obviously Edward saves her life again, and then he's kind of like justified in his like insane anxiety around needing to protect her, and like talks a lot about her being like such a magnet for anything bad or dangerous that could happen to someone, like it'll happen to Bella, is another big theme that we just didn't touch on. But yeah, it does kind of go with the like, guardian vampire.
And even Alice says something about like, oh, she really needs like 24-hour protection, which I'm like, I don't really agree with that. I don't think he needs to watch her sleep, but you know.
Nothing's happened to her like in her house yet, so
yeah. And Edward even makes a comment, I don't remember where exactly it is in this section, but it was in the section we read about when he was leaving her house, how he wasn't like worried about her because Charlie was there, and he was glad that her father was the chief of police, because that's a protection for her. So I'm like, so she has I guess Charlie's sleeping then, so nobody's protecting her. He better be there.
Yeah. Are any final thoughts? I don't want to cut you off again.
No, that is all I have.
Phenomenal. Well, let me iterate once more. Just what a section. What a section. This was a good one. This was a good one.
Yeah. We got a vampire. We didn't know that for sure until now if we were only reading Twilight.
Yeah, right? Which is, it's a decent ways in to the book, but not like the mystery is he's a vampire and they're falling in love, which is...
But I'm also like, how many people go into reading Twilight and don't know there's a vampire in it, Like, how many people were surprised by that?
Right. You only would have been surprised, I feel like, if you were reading it before it was hyped, like before it was a big thing. I think every person knows now. So, yeah.
But even then, I'm like, what does the back cover of the book say if it doesn't say anything about vampires?
Ooh, look, I'll read it.
There we go.
I got it. Oh, just kidding. I have an edition that's all the notes, like all the New York Times bestseller. But okay. It's the quote. It's the quote. The most highlighted one. That's what the back of the book is.
Oh, yeah. So you know there's vampires. Okay.
Yeah, about 3 things I was absolutely positive. First, Edward was a vampire. Second, there was a part of him, and I did not know how dominant that part might be that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's the original one, or if it's just the clip. Yeah, I've got a paperback copy, so it's not like
Kindle, which I don't think has
descriptions of the cover. Yeah, because if it was a hardcover, then they'd have the original one like here. But
yeah.
Anyways, okay, well, there we go. That was the quote. Great.
Mm-hmm.
What a time.
For next week, we are reading Twilight chapters 10 through 12 and Midnight Sun 11 through 14, and only 3 minutes of the movie. And to get more details, check out our Instagram, which is Glittery Musings.
Feel free to email us your thoughts from this week's episode. And if you're like, man, I really hope they talk about X, or you want ideas for segments or anything, email us all your thoughts from the podcast. That's glitterymusingspod@gmail.com. And we'll see you.
No email is too long.
Yes, no email is too long, Dallas, and anyone else with extensive notes. We so appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next Tuesday for another Twilight Tuesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye.